There are children who grow up learning that the world is unsafe and worse, that they are alone in facing its dangers. These are children who could not trust the place that should have been a fortress, home. They could not trust the people who should have been shields, their caregivers. Instead, they learned that safety is conditional, that protection is unreliable, and that if they are to survive, they must do it by themselves. Their bodies remain tense, their minds forever scanning for threats that others have long since stopped noticing. And even now, even in moments of genuine safety, some part of them remains vigilant, waiting for the moment when protection disappears, when danger returns, when they must fend for themselves once more. Chapter 1: The Absence of a Fortress. Home should be a fortress. It should be the place where a child learns to rest, to trust, to unfold. Instead, for some children, home becomes a landscape of threat, not because danger is always visibly present, but because it could arrive at any moment, in any form. These children learn to scan, constantly, vigilantly, exhaustedly. A raised voice is not just a raised voice, it is a warning. A parent's unexplained sadness is not depression. It is an unpredictable force that could erupt. A brother's mood, a sister's tears, the absence of a parent, the silence before an argument, all become data points in a child's internal threat assessment system. This hypervigilance is not a character trait. It is not a flaw in the child's personality. It is an adaptive response to an environment where protection was never guaranteed. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a leading trauma researcher, explains that when children cannot rely on their caregivers to provide safety, their nervous systems stay perpetually activated as if danger is always minutes away. The world, for these children, is fundamentally unsafe. And worse, they are fundamentally alone in facing it. The child who never felt protected develops an acute sensitivity to emotional climates. They become experts at reading minute shifts in a parent's facial expression. They know, without being told, when conflict is brewing. They can sense anger beneath a calm exterior. This ability to read others is sometimes mistaken for empathy, but it is actually survival, a desperate attempt to predict danger before it arrives. The body of an unprotected child is a body at war with itself. The sympathetic nervous system, responsible for the fight or flight response, remains constantly activated. Even in moments of physical safety, even in sleep, the child's system remains primed to detect threat. Cortisol, the stress hormone, bathes the developing brain in continuous doses that, over time, alter its structure and function. The child's amygdala, the threat detection center, becomes hyperreactive. Their prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking and emotional regulation, remains underdeveloped. The balance between fear and safety tips irreversibly toward fear. In childhood, this system serves a purpose. It keeps the child vigilant. It helps them anticipate danger. It allows them to survive in an unsafe environment. But it also prevents them from exploring, from playing, from the fundamental developmental tasks of childhood. Secure attachment begins with a child's confidence that a caregiver will respond to their needs. The securely attached child explores the world freely because they trust that their attachment figure is a secure base, available if danger emerges. The unprotected child cannot afford such confidence. Their secure base has already failed them or never existed at all. What emerges instead is anxious attachment. The child becomes hyper-alert to the caregiver's emotional states, constantly monitoring for signs of rejection or abandonment. Or it is avoidant attachment. The child learns that their needs will not be met, so they shut down their attachment system entirely and rely solely on themselves. Or it is disorganized attachment, the most painful of all, where the caregiver is simultaneously the source of both fear and the only available source of comfort. The unprotected child grows into an unprotected adolescent and eventually into an unprotected adult. Their hypervigilance remains. Their nervous system remains dysregulated, and they carry with them a core belief. I cannot trust anyone to keep me safe. I must do it alone. This belief, once adaptive, becomes a prison. It prevents genuine connection. It exhausts the body and mind, and it makes genuine rest, the kind that comes from feeling truly protected, nearly impossible. Chapter 2. When protectors become threats. The roots of feeling unprotected are varied, but they share a common feature. The person responsible for providing safety has failed to do so. Sometimes this failure is dramatic. A parent whose rage erupts unpredictably, transforming the home into a dangerous place. Sometimes it is subtle. A parent who is emotionally absent, physically present but psychologically unavailable, unable or unwilling to attune to their child's emotional needs. One pattern that produces unprotected children is parental hypervigilance itself. A parent who has experienced trauma, anxiety, or unresolved fear projects that anxious state onto their child. Instead of being a calming presence, the parent becomes a mirror of danger. The child learns that the world is so unsafe that even their protector is terrified. Research shows that hypervigilant parenting, characterized by excessive worry, overprotection, and emotional inconsistency, disrupts a child's ability to develop secure attachment. The child becomes attuned not to their own needs, but to their parent's emotional state, constantly adjusting their behavior to manage the adult's anxiety. Another pathway is parental inconsistency. A caregiver who is sometimes warm and sometimes cold, sometimes responsive and sometimes rejecting, creates a child who cannot predict when safety will be available. These children develop what attachment theorists call anxious preoccupied attachment. They become desperately focused on maintaining proximity to the caregiver, scanning constantly for signs of rejection. They never relax because they never know if the moments of connection will last. They learn that connection is fragile and must be desperately clung to. Traumatized parents often cannot provide the emotional safety their children need. A parent who is themselves unhealed from their own trauma carries an activated nervous system, an unregulated emotional state, and often unprocessed fear. When this parent's child expresses distress, crying, fear, neediness, the child's vulnerability can trigger the parent's own trauma responses. Instead of providing comfort, the parent becomes dysregulated, sometimes withdrawing emotionally, sometimes responding with anger or fear. The message the child receives is, "Your fear is dangerous. Your needs make me unsafe. Do not show me your vulnerability." Parental absence, whether physical or emotional, leaves a void where protection should be. Children whose parents are absent due to work, addiction, mental illness, or simply emotional unavailability learn that they cannot count on being comforted, that their fears will not be witnessed, that they must manage their own terror. Research shows that parental absence significantly disrupts attachment formation and increases the risk of anxiety, depression, and developmental trauma in children. The child internalizes the message, "I am alone in this. No one is coming to protect me." Some homes are chaotic, filled with unpredictability, conflict, substance abuse, or violence. In these environments, the child learns that danger can emerge at any moment from any direction. They cannot predict when a parent will be kind or cruel, when anger will erupt, when they will be safe to make a mistake or show a feeling. This constant unpredictability dysregulates the developing brain more profoundly than even consistent danger, because the child cannot develop strategies to cope. The threat keeps changing form. The unprotected child often blames themselves. Children have a profound need to believe that their caregivers are good, and that therefore, the lack of protection is their own fault. A child might think, "If I were less difficult, my parent would be present. If I were less sensitive, my parent wouldn't be triggered by my tears. If I were more self-sufficient, I wouldn't need protection." This self-blame becomes another brick in the fortress of protection the child must build around themselves. Chapter 3. The neurobiology of unprotected fear. The absence of felt safety is not merely a psychological phenomenon, it is encoded in the architecture of the developing brain. When a child does not have a secure attachment figure to provide comfort and regulation, their own capacity to self-regulate develops incompletely. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, becomes hyperreactive, almost as if it remains in a state of constant alarm. Attachment theory, founded by John Bowlby and expanded by Mary Ainsworth, describes how caregiving shapes brain development. A securely attached child has a caregiver who is consistently responsive and attuned. When the child experiences distress, the caregiver provides comfort, regulation, and the implicit message, "You are safe. I am here. The world is not as scary as you think." Over time, the child internalizes this safety. Their nervous system learns to down-regulate. Their brain develops robust connections between the threat detection system, amygdala, and the regulation system, prefrontal cortex. The unprotected child does not have this secure base. Instead, their amygdala remains persistently activated, their prefrontal cortex underdeveloped, and the pathways between them weak. The child's brain learns to interpret ambiguous situations as threatening. A slightly raised voice becomes a threat. A parent's distracted expression becomes a signal of danger. The child's sympathetic nervous system remains in a chronically activated state, the hallmark of hypervigilance. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis, the body's central stress response system, is also dysregulated. Normally, this system activates in response to acute stress, releasing cortisol to help the body respond to threats. In unprotected children, however, the HPA axis becomes chronically overactive, leading to persistently elevated cortisol levels. This continuous exposure to stress hormones damages developing brain structures, impairs synaptic development, and increases the child's vulnerability to anxiety and depression later in life. Research using neuroimaging reveals physical differences in the brains of children who experience deprivation or lack of protection. Studies of Romanian orphans who experienced severe deprivation and lack of attachment showed profound effects on brain structure and function. While these are extreme cases, research suggests that even less severe versions of unprotectedness, emotional unavailability, parental anxiety, inconsistent caregiving, alter brain development in measurable ways. Insecure attachment comes in several forms, each linked to different parenting patterns. Anxious preoccupied attachment develops when a child's needs are sometimes met and sometimes not. The inconsistency makes the child hyper-alert, desperately trying to secure the caregiver's attention and care. The brain learns, protection is available but unpredictable. I must be hypervigilant and cling tightly to maintain access to safety. Dismissive avoidant attachment develops when a child's needs are consistently rejected or minimized. The child learns that expressing needs is pointless and dangerous, so they shut down their attachment system and develop a defensive autonomy. The brain learns, protection is not available. I cannot rely on others. I must rely only on myself. Fearful, avoidant, disorganized attachment is the most damaging. It develops when the caregiver is simultaneously the source of fear and the only available source of comfort. The child's brain is caught in an impossible paradox, seeking proximity to the person they fear. This creates profound dysregulation and long-term difficulties with emotional regulation, trust, and relationship formation. Chapter 4. The Architecture of Fear and Coping. A child without felt protection cannot simply relax into childhood. They must develop strategies, often unconscious, to survive in an unsafe world. These strategies are ingenious, adaptive, and profoundly costly. Safety-seeking behaviors are among the most common. These are actions a child develops to prevent the feared outcome of danger or abandonment. They might check repeatedly that a parent is home. They might become the good child, never expressing needs or showing emotion, believing the complicity will prevent punishment. They might monitor a parent's mood obsessively, trying to preempt anger or withdrawal. They might develop rituals, ways of organizing their space or their day that give the illusion of control. Perfectionism is another common strategy. The unprotected child may develop an intense drive for achievement, believing that if they are good enough, smart enough, successful enough, they will finally be protected or loved. No amount of achievement ever feels sufficient, because the underlying wound is not about capability. It is about fundamental lovability and safety. Hyperactivity of the sympathetic nervous system can manifest as agitation, difficulty concentrating, or explosive emotional responses. The child's system is so primed for danger that minor frustrations can feel life-threatening. Teachers and parents often pathologize this as ADHD or behavior disorder when it is actually a physiological response to chronic stress. Some unprotected children develop avoidant coping. They shut down emotionally, dissociate, or withdraw from relationships entirely. This is adaptive in the short term. If no one is there to protect you, perhaps it is safer to expect nothing from anyone. But it prevents the deep human connections that are essential for healing and growth. Others develop anxious coping. They become hyper-attuned to others' emotional states, constantly reading the room, adjusting their behavior to manage others' feelings. They sacrifice their own authenticity to maintain relationships, believing that connection, even conditional connection, is better than the terror of being alone. There is also the exhausting paradox that unprotected children often find in adulthood. They may desperately seek connection and safety through romantic relationships, yet their nervous systems remain dysregulated. When a partner is close, the unprotected adult may panic and push them away. When the partner distances, the adult may cling desperately, replicating the anxious dance of childhood. All of these coping strategies have a common feature. They require enormous amounts of psychological energy. The unprotected child and adult live in a state of chronic activation. They cannot truly rest because rest feels dangerous. They cannot fully trust because trust was violated long ago. They cannot fully relax into relationships because relationships are where they learn to be unsafe. Chapter 5. The moment trust becomes possible. The turning point for an unprotected person rarely comes as a dramatic revelation. More often, it arrives in the form of exhaustion, a growing recognition that the cost of remaining always on guard is becoming unbearable. The body begins to break down. Anxiety becomes so pervasive that it interferes with daily functioning. Relationships fail repeatedly, following the same painful patterns. And slowly, sometimes against all instincts, the thought emerges. What if I have been living as if I am still in danger, even though I am not? Sometimes the turning point comes through a relationship that is different. A partner, friend, or family member who is consistently safe, whose words match their actions, who does not hurt or withdraw when the unprotected person expresses vulnerability. Repeated experiences of this reliability begin to chip away at the old belief that all people are ultimately unsafe. For many, the turning point comes in therapy. A skilled therapist becomes what attachment theorists call a corrective emotional experience, a person who attunes to unmet needs, who provides genuine protection and consistency, and who helps the unprotected person gradually recognize that their nervous system's alarm response may have been protective once but is now outdated. This is reparenting. The therapeutic relationship becomes a safe container in which the unprotected person can gradually learn what genuine safety feels like. The recognition often comes with profound grief. An unprotected adult must grieve the childhood they did not have, the safety they deserved but did not receive, the years spent as a vigilant, exhausted child bearing unbearable alone. This grief is necessary and sacred. It is the acknowledgement that what happened was real, that it mattered, and that it changed them. With recognition comes a new possibility: earned, secure attachment. This is the finding that attachment styles are not fixed, that through conscious work and healing relationships, it is possible to gradually develop a more secure sense of self and safety. The unprotected person begins to notice moments when they trust, when they let their guard down, when they experience genuine rest. These moments are fragile at first, easily disrupted by stress or perceived threat, but they are real. Chapter 6. Building an internal fortress. Healing from a childhood without felt protection is not about eliminating the protective systems that kept the child alive. It is about gradually, gently, creating internal safety when external safety was never provided. This is the work of reparenting, of becoming for oneself protective and compassionate guardian that one's actual caregivers could not be. Reparenting has two essential dimensions. Self-mothering is the practice of providing comfort, soothing, validation, and compassionate response to one's own distress. When panic arises, instead of fighting it or dissociating from it, the practiced person asks, "What would I say to a child I love who is scared right now?" Then they say it to themselves. This is not positive thinking or denial. It is genuine compassion. Self-fathering is the practice of providing protection, assertiveness, and strength. For many who experience lack of protection, standing up for oneself feels dangerous. It means drawing a boundary, saying no, risking abandonment. Self-fathering builds the inner voice that says, "I will protect you. You are safe with me. Your needs matter. No one will hurt you and get away with it." Somatic therapy, work that engages the body and nervous system, is particularly powerful for healing from lack of protection. Trauma and deprivation are stored not just in the mind, but in the body. Through breath work, grounding exercises, and other somatic practices, the unprotected person can gradually teach their nervous system that safety is possible, that the world is not as dangerous as it once seemed. Schema therapy, which works with deep patterns of belief formed in childhood, can help the unprotected person recognize and gradually modify core schemas like "I am unprotected" or "others cannot be trusted." Internal family systems IFS therapy helps the person recognize their protective parts, the ones that have been working so hard to keep them safe, with compassion, while gradually opening space for a more secure, connected sense of self. Creating external safety is also essential. A secure therapeutic relationship becomes a consistent experience of being protected and understood. Close friendships with reliable people gradually teach that safety in relationships is possible. Sometimes this means physically moving away from unsafe people or situations, or setting firm boundaries that protect one's emotional space. Nervous system regulation practices, meditation, yoga, time in nature, creative expression, help the dysregulated body gradually learn to downregulate. The goal is not to eliminate the fight or flight response entirely, but to restore the capacity to rest, to explore, to trust, to connect without constant fear. Chapter 7. The possibility of true rest. There is a moment, often quiet and unexpected, when an unprotected person, now an adult who has done the work of reparenting, who has felt the witness of a safe other, who has gradually learned to distinguish past danger from present safety, realizes they have fallen asleep without checking the locks, or they have spoken a vulnerable truth without immediately bracing for rejection, or they have experienced joy without the accompanying dread that something bad will happen. These moments are not the end of the journey. They are glimpses of what becomes possible when the nervous system finally believes, not intellectually but viscerally, in the cells and synapses, that protection is real. Healing does not mean the erasure of the protective systems that once kept the child alive. The hypervigilance, the safety-seeking, the careful attention to others' moods, these were genius adaptations. They deserve recognition and gratitude. But healing means they no longer need to work so hard, so constantly, so exhaustingly. The person who never felt protected can gradually learn to live in a body that is not always at war. The unprotected child grows into an unprotected adult, but the unprotected adult can grow into someone who is learning, finally, gently, to provide protection from within. Not the grim, defensive protection of constant vigilance, but the warm, secure protection of genuine self-compassion, the belief that one's own needs matter. The gradual ability to trust, not blindly or recklessly, but wisely, with eyes open. True rest is not about the elimination of threat or the achievement of perfect safety. The world contains real dangers, and attention to safety is wisdom. But true rest is the capacity to let go sometimes, to experience moments of genuine relaxation, to take up space without fear, to feel protected finally, not by an external guardian who never came, but by an internal presence that says, I am here. I see you. You are safe with me. You are worth protecting. For a child who never felt protected, this is revolutionary. This is healing. Not the erasure of the past, but the gradual, courageous rewriting of what safety means. References: absence of protection and felt safety in childhood. The neurobiology of fear and safety seeking in children. Reparenting, seeking healing for your inner child. Attachment security, the role of infant, maternal, and parent characteristics. How hypervigilance affects parenting attachment. Relationship between childhood trauma, parental bonding, and defensive styles. What is a secure attachment and attachment security? Why we mind read. The attachment roots of hypervigilance. Investigating the association between parental absence and developmental trauma. Simply psychology attachment theory. In psychology, a lifespan development. Theory of insecure attachment. Parental absence as an adverse childhood experience. Childhood attachment, disturbed attachment, and physical and psychological ill health. The impact of caregiver trauma on parenting and child brain development. Attachment issues and attachment disorders in children help guide. Insecure attachment style. Causes, signs, and types. Parental absence in childhood and mental health outcomes. The impact of the environment on neurodevelopmental outcomes. Reparenting yourself towards secure attachment. A path to healing. Child safety behavior scale. Safety-seeking behaviors and trauma. How to reparent yourself with anxious or avoidant attachment. Challenges of nervous system, dysregulation in parenthood. Healing the childhood you never had. Reparenting after attachment wounds. The impacts of trauma on anxiety disorders. Reparenting techniques, benefits, and principles. Understanding nervous system. Dysregulation, a path to healing. What are safety-seeking behaviors? Why you need to know about them. Attachment trauma, what is it? Healing through reparenting.